I was reading your titles and your your artist statement, or what the galleries have listed for you, and I noticed it's all either transformation or rebirth, or there's a lot of like chrysalis. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that, because it's such a theme, or it seems to be.
Right.
Yeah, I misinterpreted.
No, it absolutely is, because I really came into painting in a huge transition, in a huge transitional time for me, because I had just gone through a divorce, and I kind of just slingshotted into a career in real estate, which is bizarre, but I was really looking for security, because I was terrified. I was, on my own with two kids. I was, so I kind of, I just immediately fell into real estate. It was a good time to be in real estate, and it was something that I could enter into quickly, because I'd been a graphic designer previously, but stepped out of work when the kids were little. I immediately ran to that, and it wasn't bad. Like, I really actually enjoyed it. Like I said, it was a good time to be in real estate, and then I just kind of fell into painting. My son and I had done a small piece. It was not significant. My mother painted in her garage, and so we would go over there and visit with her while she was painting, and the kids had big wheels and all this stuff in the garage to play with, and they literally would like set up obstacle courses in the studio and out into the cold. Oh yeah, absolutely. And even drive over the canvases themselves, because if you talk to anyone, I'm sure they would tell you, like, the hardest thing is a white canvas. It's almost easier just to mess them up, and then something happens. Yeah, something happens. Yeah. Something just stark white it's haunting. Like, what am I going to do? And so yeah, Max and I done something, and I wish I'd saved it. I had no idea it would be important. But Marianne Lampert, who is a curator here in Atlanta, came by the studio to pick up an auction piece of my mother's, and she saw this little doodle and inquired about it. My mom said, "That's Tracy and Max," and she was like, tell her to call me. And so I called her.
And you were how long after the divorce? Like, where?
It was 2 years.
Okay.
And so I called her. She invited me to do the Small Pieces show at the Swan Coach House, which was the perfect introduction, because if you've ever been to that show, it's like 100 artists. It's not intimidating at all, and all the pieces are tiny. They're like under 8 inches by 8 inches. And so I was like, I can do that.
Right.
8
it wasn't
by 8.
Yep. Had you been to that show yourself before?
Yeah, my whole life, because my mom was a painter.
Right. So you knew it. You knew the format.
And I knew the format. I knew what the show was like, and I was, honored to be a part of it. Marianne does a good job of kind of curating that show, and that probably about half of it is established artists, and then the other half is just anybody. And so I kind of jumped in. It was just 4 pieces. It was not that big a deal. And I'd never painted before, ever. Even though my mother was an artist and I grew up around it, I'd never painted. I went into graphic design. I was creative, but I'd never painted anything in my life. So I painted these 4 tiny little pieces, put them in the show. And during the time that the show was up, I was invited by Maitre Gallery to join the gallery.
Wow.
And so it was just...
From the 4 pieces?
From those 4... Well, the 4 pieces turned into like 12, because they sold. And then I replaced them, and then I replaced them. And so, like, something happened, right? Something sort of sparked. And, so it just kind of flowed from there. I joined Maitre, and it was not long after that they offered me a solo show. It was bizarre. Like, it just
So, like, within
happened.
a year? Within a year.
So within a year.
Were you still scared?
No, because I was totally in flow. There was no time to get scared. Sometimes in life, whether it's art or anything that you're doing, this book for you, when it's flowing, you're not afraid, because it's moving so easily being old is amazing because I don't question things anymore. And I don't, I don't hesitate because, like you said, as long as you're moving and flow, and everybody experiences it. It's universal. Like flow belongs to everybody in different degrees. With you, your book has flowed. Athletes call it the zone, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, they call it being in the pocket. Like everybody's had that experience of absolutely every door just opening. And a big part of your story and a big part of my story is coming from that place of, unfortunately, like this big transition.
Yep.
There's nothing like, life's hard pieces to really open you up.
Yeah.
And if you allow it and if you keep your eyes open, there is always good stuff that will come to you. But it's a common thread as well. It's a common story.
Yeah. And
a lot of people that kind of find themselves in this space of just things just kind of happening. A lot of times it happens as transient moments.
Because I'm looking through all your work and it's kind of there, and you talk about how thick they are and how many layers they are and what and you have coffee in some of them and lots of different wax in some of them.
Yeah, even down to the materials. It's duality. It's the human experience. That balance between vulnerability and strength. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of courage to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I think that's why the artist's story, the creative story, your story, often follows one of those epic moments.
I think you're right. Let's talk about the white canvas that you wrote. When you see, do you have in your heart, head, body a feeling? Do you have it visually already in your head?
I never have it visually in my head. I usually have a feeling, right? Both of these pieces are mantra pieces. So this is part of a new body of work that I've been working on. And if you can look, you can see the words. Yeah. And so, I meditate every day. And I will meditate on a mantra and sort of create and generate a certain type of feeling. And again, sort of tackling that white canvas. I'll scribble the mantra all over the white canvas, and then I'll start painting over it. And then I'll scribble it some more and paint over it. Scribble and paint. There's plaster on this one. And then all of a sudden shapes start to form. Shapes start to form. It's the same with these coffee pieces because, if you throw coffee on something and then you throw acrylic or oil, because coffee mixes with nothing, like all these accidents happen, all these accidental qualities happen. Everything starts to kind of separate. Like even with the words here, the paint smears the words across the canvas. Words are dragged, and all of a sudden you're creating like these sort of muddy spaces and then these hard lines. And then something kind of comes together, like you start seeing something. And it is movement. And so as much as I can, I try not to think. As much as I can, when I'm working on a piece, I'm working pretty close to it, and I'm just trying to just sort of react to what's going on. Well, just intuitive, just intuitive. And then you step back and you see what's happening. But, putting too much thought in things for me it can be the death of a piece. For me, it's best to just move with it, to just try to flow with what's happening. And the important thing, too, is to know when to just walk out the door, when to just leave it.
I never know if a painting's ever done. Sometimes you just have to walk away.
It's never done. It's never done. It's like life. It's never, it's never done. It just continues on. It's energy. But it is. It's the hardest thing in the world sometimes just to step away. And then you come back the next day, you see something completely different. You know what I mean? So, yeah. It's interesting.
So when you're at a show, like one of your shows, when you have pieces in a show or it's your show, and you are walking around and maybe they don't know who you are, or you just are around and they haven't caught sight of you yet, and you hear people talking about your work, is it interesting to you what they see different from what you had in your head? Or
for all people that create, whether it's words, music, or art, it's just your expression. But the way people receive it is completely different. You know, like all things, you know, my experience of absolutely everything is completely unique from yours.
Right.
And from the next person and from the next person. So it's interesting. You know, for the longest time, I really resisted ever even titling pieces.
So
I still
heavy-handed
struggle with it because I feel like it sort of implies a meaning. And really, the meaning lies in you, you know? Once it leaves me, it's my expression, but then it becomes something new, you know? It's sort of, again, it just transitions. It transitions into this experience with the viewer or the person that, you know, brings the piece into their home.
Is it hard for you to let go of pieces?
Sometimes.
Because of what they've been cathartic for you, or
It depends. There are some pieces, because like anything where you're expressing yourself, you're getting things out. And so some of them are kind of hard to let go. And preparing a show is interesting because, you know, you're more or less kind of hoarding work, right? Like it's building and building and you're kind of, you know, creating this thing.
Talk to me about that. Growing up with a mom artist,
We would do things together. We would do things together, more or less like projects. But it's a common thing actually. Shadow issues, right? Like if you have a parent that is just super, super dynamic, a lot of times it's the shadow, right? And you do not want to go into it, you know? With my kids, their father played professional tennis. They didn't play tennis, barely picked up a racket until they were much, much older because they didn't want the attention. They didn't want the expectations that come with that, with having that parent. And so, yeah, I never painted. Now, of course, I would, you know, spend hours and hours in my mother's studio, and she has funny stories. I mean, I can barely remember, but she had something on an easel once, and I was little, tiny. And she said that she had gone to fix lunch or something, and she came back, and I had signed my name, like, huge, on one of her paintings. She was like, what the heck, Tracy?
Just asking. So I'm reading into, and you tell me, like, was it, so there could be two things going on. One is you kind of wanted to try it but didn't want to, so you wrote your name? Or is it that, Mom, I want you to see me and not paint? Did you spend too much time painting? Like, what was that? Or was it just, I feel like signing it?
I'm just going to sign my name and claim this work of beauty. No, she surrounded me with herself all the time. And I think a lot of times, too, with parents, you know, you're trying to find your own path. You want your way. And you want to be independent. And the hysterical thing is, you know, I grew up with a mother that painted and she taught yoga. And I now, at 51, am a painter and teach yoga. You know?
You're your mother!
Exactly. It's like...
Right. You want to be your mom, you don't want to be your mom. You want to be your mom, you don't.
She's lovely. But it's just that I think it's for all of us. You know, we want that independence. We want to find our own way. And then all of a sudden you look up and you go, I'm right here. I'm home. So
when you and Max had done that painting and the gallery person said, you know, call me.
Yeah.
What was Mom like?
My mother's pretty amazing. And I think she understood flow. And she understood what it meant to absolutely move forward without fear. So she was very nonchalant about it. She said, you ought to do it. She was so casual because she felt like, even then, and she's told me, it was always my path. She said she always knew it was. And so when all of this is happening, and she's been so supportive, I mean, throughout this whole process, there's no way I would do what I do without her, you know, because, you know, all of this happened, and all of a sudden Maitre had asked me to join the gallery, and then there was another dealer that was doing a show in Denver and wanted to take my work there, and this is all happening right at the same time. And then it really wasn't until that moment, I had been painting really for just about a year, and at this point I had joined several galleries. But things are still, like, I still have no idea what I'm doing, you know? I'm just doing it.
You haven't stepped back yet. I love that method.
Yeah.
You haven't.
Like, when I look back on it, I think that's impossible, you know, but it was time. It was time for me to renew my license. I had done, you know, continuing education to, you know, to certify for the extension. And, you know, the check, the envelope, it sat on the table. And it sat and it sat and it sat. And it was like 3 weeks of just going by it, looking at it. And I just knew, Tina, like I knew, like, you know, like sometimes you do know that if I tried to straddle that fence, that I wouldn't be giving anything all of my attention. And that the only way to really, really explore this would be to let go. I had to let go.
But you didn't have anybody to act, you know, like you were a single mom at this point.
It's a big decision.
I just wanted to,
my kids were young. They were.
Yes.
And just me. Literally
right.
just me.
Right.
So it was a big step. But you know, at the time, I mean, I knew it was big, but again, it was just kind of moving with it. And I just ripped up the envelope, and I do remember every minute of that, like literally standing over the trash can and just shredding that and being like, okay, this is it.